Hey, Work Positive Nation, how does your company culture define peak performance? Long hours, high expectations, tight deadlines, constant change, competing demands, pushing yourself to the limit daily, sacrificing other areas of your life? A positive work culture cultivates peak performance by facilitating small behavior tweaks across various influencing factors that have a profound effect. It's more about fine tuning for optimum outcomes across your mind, body, and business. Well, my guest on this episode of the Work Positive podcast shares her unique system that empowers healthy, sustainable peak performance. She's a qualified chartered banker, NLP practitioner, executive and leadership coach, personal trainer, even a nutrition coach. So lean in, listen up, and love your work as we learn all about peak performance on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach and culture architect, Dr. Joey Fawcett. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Joey talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Joey.
Positive Nation, you're going to love this podcast. But I say that about all of them. But you're really going to love this one because the Abigail Ireland is in the Work Positive house. Abigail, welcome to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Joe. Really looking forward to chatting with you today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, me too, because we're talking about peak performance, and I just feel like all pumped up and ready to go run a marathon or something. Just saying peak
Brilliant.
Performance makes me.
You'll have to do it after this then, now that you've said that.
Well, a marathon's a really long ways. I mean, like over here we measure things in miles. That's like 26 miles. Half would be 13. I did walk 2 miles this morning, so I think props to me for that, right?
Brilliant.
So I love in the introduction, I picked up something from your bio where you talk about mind, body, and business. What a really cool combination of who we are. Because so often in the past, particularly in my generation, we looked at people as more commodities to do certain things. And yet Gen Z, there's a recent Wall Street Journal article is really talking about Gen Z insist upon being regarded as people. Who knew? we need to be seeing each other as people. So I love this intersection of mind, body, and business that we're going to talk about today in terms of peak performance. So it's not just how to keep the email inbox managed. It's about you as a person, Work Positive Nation. So Abigail's here to tell us all about that. How did you get turned on and tuned into mind, body, business?
Yeah, I think it was an evolution. Like I started my career in banking, and like you were saying, Dr. Joey, it was, very much about the technical skills and getting the job done and being the resource, I guess. And then over the years, I thought, you're working at a high level for so long, and that you have to do more to protect yourself, to energize yourself, to stay operating at that peak. And most of that comes down to, as a human being, what can you do? So looking at your physiology, your mind, your ability to focus, and all the other things. And I just got really interested in it. I started off being really interested in what you eat, nutrition. Was it really conducive to being able to work really late at night on Excel spreadsheets when you were having a pizza or a Chinese takeaway whilst you were in the office? Or would it have been better to have something that would keep my brain going? Was it better to go to sleep and wake up the next morning and get the work done rather than stay up in the office till, midnight? So all of those things got me really thinking that there are better ways to do things, and we usually don't think about those in the workplace. It's changing, but it's not the norm, I would say. It's almost like it's lower in priority to focus on the other stuff than the how do you do your actual job, I think.
Yeah, and so many people refer to those as soft skills, right?
Exactly, yeah. And we're humans, so especially now that I think AI is so much bigger and technology, we can't compete against the machines essentially and the artificial intelligence. So what we do need to do is leverage the humanness of who we are even more, I would say.
And what an amazing opportunity, as my friend Dr. Bob Johansson and I talked about on a previous episode of the Work Positive podcast, just to allow the creativity, the innovative spirit, the kinds of things that really create competitive advantage in the marketplace, and to allow our humanity to be developed. My friend Lindsay Dowd on a previous episode also talked about instead of soft skills, let's call them power skills. I really like that because we want
Yeah, I
to
love
power
that.
ourselves up as humans. But I love the fact that your interest in mind body business came out of your own journey because it sounds like you were working on Excel sheets at midnight and
Yes,
scarfing
yeah. I
down
was thinking, I mean,
pizza,
I was,
right?
yeah, it was, doing a lot of detailed work, often late at night, under pressure when there were deadlines. And it wasn't just that though, but it was, I moved to Australia when I was working in banking, and
Uh-huh.
you can't go on Bondi Beach and not see loads of really fit people around and think I need to also up my game. And so
Uh-huh.
I remember one of the directors in the team I was in when I was in Australia, would go surfing, sometimes, or after off work or the weekends. And I thought, wow, this is different to being in London, where it wasn't that kind of environment where people would focus as much on their health and fitness. Things have changed, but it was just kind of part of the way that people were to include having this healthy balance with working on what you need to do, but also making sure you're looking after your well-being to perform at a higher level. And it's about sustaining it, because anyone can work at a high level, but you burn out if you don't nourish and nurture yourself as well.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, when you burn out in a week, they'll have somebody else sitting in your chair.
That happens, yeah, that definitely happens. And that's what people don't realize. Sometimes people think I'm too important, or I have to be constantly checking my emails on holiday and all these things. And
Mm.
we've probably all done it, but there has to be some kind of balance and checking in with ourselves, because you can't escape your body ever until the very end. So you need to make sure it's in its best condition to help you to do everything else that you need to do.
Yeah, and those important relationships, like there you are working on an Excel spreadsheet, eating pizza close to midnight. Maybe you were married then to Mr. Ireland, right? And so that's one husband, one relationship, and yet there's going to be a bazillion spreadsheets to work on in your career, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Sometimes I would be, coming home really late at night, and people do. There are jobs where you do end up, some careers where you do have to put in the hours and do
Sure.
things to make sure things get done on time. But if it's constantly happening, or sometimes though, I reflect back actually, and I think there was more I could have done to take more control over my
Oh, really?
boundaries, and
Yeah.
being able to be more productive and more efficient into how I work, not kind of working really constantly until you do get to that point where your brain just doesn't work anymore. So I think there are things on both sides that need to be
Yeah.
considered for a good
Oh,
environment at
that's
work.
an interesting point, and I appreciate that because I think that's vital to your reflection and our learning from your experiences. So often it's, oh, that company, the Acme Corporation, they don't care for people and da 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 and that kind of stuff. Well, hey, newsflash, you were complicit in the conspiracy
Yes.
because you did not push back or you did
Yeah.
not say, I'm not going to stay here till midnight doing that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But back to your point about AI, it's really cool now that some of those, I hate to call them rudimentary, but I'll just say redundant task or repetitive task, right, can be done by AI now that maybe it takes us till midnight to do when we
Yeah.
can tend to ourselves, mind, body, business better and use our innovation and creativity to come up as that competitive advantage that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So
I
what
think that's the
what
main
would you have
point.
done differently looking back?
I think for me, the thing that I think I definitely now don't do as much, but I did do then, I still have moments where I do it, is the kind of wanting to everything to be perfect. And I think a lot of people, a lot of my clients are like that too, in terms of I produce like a PowerPoint deck, and it would be for internal use, but it would go to our CEO or senior level executives. And so I would want it to be done properly. And then, you show it to people, and then things need to change anyway. So you've got to do things again. So I think there was that aspect of get it done versus trying to be making it perfect every time,
Mhm.
that I would change. And also sometimes trusting yourself more. It all comes down to trusting yourself to think, is it good enough? Sometimes you think, oh, I need to keep going till the last minute for it to be perfect. Sometimes also the thing I would change is, again, going back to trusting yourself, thinking that I had to do things in the same style as other people. I don't know if you've ever done that, but sometimes if a report
That's
was
funny.
written in a certain style,
Yep.
I'd be like, oh, I should be writing like that, or this should be designed like this, or my thinking should be done in this way. And it slows you down rather than trusting yourself to get to the outcome in
Mm,
your own way. So I think, again, there's a little bit of sometimes the way the organization might say things need to be done. But I think there is an element of also feeling empowered because you do things the way you want to do them. And that's one of the things I like about having my own business, and you probably do too.
yeah.
It's that ability to, you can just get into the flow if you
Hmm.
enjoy and you are able to think and do things with that autonomy, I think.
Yeah, and as Dan Pink helped us understand, autonomy is really important, right? And I
Yeah.
think we're all looking to make those choices. Trusting yourself, man, that is absolutely huge. How do we attract top talent and facilitate their understanding that our culture is one of trusting yourself while working collaboratively on a team?
That's a good question. I think with any talent, they are going to, if we want to attract top talent, they need to feel like this is the organization I want to work at. And so
Mm,
the communication, how we're marketing the organization, and then not just that, but when they come to the organization, practicing what you preach
mm,
and walking the talk, they're going to be the key things. Because again, a lot of companies talk about the fact that you'll be able to do these things and have autonomy, we trust you. And then it doesn't happen in reality. And it could be that people are maybe too junior to be trusted at that point. So they need to learn and build up trust before they can kind of be let loose. But there is an element of then having to work with people to make sure that they feel that they are on that journey. Um, Top talent uh, wants more as well. And I'm not saying it in a kind of spoilt way of uh, they they want everything that, just stamping their feet. They want a promotion on day one, all those kind of things. But I do think that high performing people want to feel that they can learn and they can grow and they
mm,
can do things to support the organization. And when there's too much stifling going on, too
mm,
much bureaucracy, red tape, all those kind of things, it can really make it difficult for people to kind of fulfill their full potential, to step into their full potential.
mm.
So lots of variables would be at play, I would say.
Yeah, and so corporate becomes a four-letter word at that point, right? That we use to curse people because there's not the autonomy, there's not the ability to discover your own voice, if you
Yeah,
will, in the company, align your personal purpose with the company purpose, and then figure out how you
yeah,
can contribute daily to that. So creating that culture where where you're trusted and you're trustworthy. One thing I like what you really said is rather than just throwing someone in the deep end, hey, welcome to the Acme Corporation, date them hard and then marry them and then forget about them, right? Forget about the relationship. We want to stay in touch so that there's a mentor, right, who's assigned to help facilitate that growth and learning. What does it mean around the Acme Corporation to trust yourself?
yeah. And one of the things I think with top talent sometimes, or even people who are like really driven, want to do their best,
Mm,
people who have the motivation to perform, they're not given maybe the resources, the training, the skills to be able to set up for success. So sometimes
mm,
they are thrown in the deep end, and sometimes we spend too much time on the not top talent, the people who maybe don't really want to be there, the people who are complaining all the time, who are quite cynical, and there may be reasons why they are, but
mm,
sometimes we spend too much time on in the wrong places, and we're not really focusing on the people who we want to thrive. We kind of take it for granted sometimes.
mm. Yeah, it is very much the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so rather than playing to the strengths
Exactly.
of the organization, right, we're constantly trying to fix certain people. Abigail Ireland is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Her website is understandingperformance.com, and that URL is in the show notes right below where you're watching this. And so feel free, unless you're walking the dog or on the Peloton or in one of the many, many parks in London, enjoying the green space, right? Uh, Please just click on that at your convenience and go see what she's got there. And we'll find out more what she offers us there in just a few moments. So we've attracted top talent. We're facilitating this culture, this positive work culture of trusting yourself and being able to make contributions to the team while caring for yourself, mind, body, business altogether,
Mhm.
right? How do we, once we attract this top talent to the team, how do we keep them, Abigail?
Yeah. So definitely I would say everyone's got their different needs and wants and
Mm,
motivations. And
mm,
I often talk about Edgar Schein's career anchors and what makes people do what they do and keeps them motivated and keeps them driven. And different people at different points in time will have different needs. So you can't just say, oh, if we pay everyone a good amount of money, everyone will stay and that will keep them motivated. Interestingly, I was doing a client session yesterday, and someone at the beginning of the session, when I was introducing myself and talking about where I was, where I'd come from and what I do. And they were like, "Oh, why did you leave banking though? Like you get paid really good money," and started like interrogating me. And no, it was interesting though, because we were talking about career anchors. And so my thing was like I left the corporate world because I wanted autonomy and I wanted more freedom and I wanted to be creative and do things my way. And so I could do that to an extent, but then there is a bureaucracy. There are kind of layers in the
very
banking
much so.
world, and a lot of organizations,
Mm,
um, even if you are at a senior level, there's still parameters you have to operate within.
absolutely.
And for some people it might be status, it might be that you keep them because you keep changing their job title so that they've got a more senior job title, you promote
Mm,
them. Other people actually are like thinking, I don't want to get to the next level, I want to stay here, I like the doing what I'm doing, I don't want to be a leader. So
mm,
for them it would be keeping them invested in being an SME, like a specialist in what they do. Other people maybe want to be part of a team. So if you suddenly pluck out a high performer who is part of a team and get them to become like the right hand man for the CEO or something, they might feel lonely because they're kind of working on their own a little bit more.
mm,
So I think it is really about getting to know your people as individual, again back to the humanness side, getting to understand them as human beings, and then taking it from there and going, right, what is going to be important for them, and having a dialogue about it. And I think what you said earlier about the human resources versus people, that in itself gives a massive clue as to how an organization sees its people. Some's legacy, but changing that is quite important to do, I would say, over time.
Oh, quite important to bring a
Very important.
perspective of human being versus human doing. So do I
Yes.
regard you as someone almost like a commodity who, you're going to do these tasks. I'm going to put in this amount of money and expect these tasks out, as opposed to mind, body, and business in that order.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the uniqueness of that and the dialogue, the conversation that requires. So again, we're back to getting to know each other as people. Not a soft skill, might sound squishy to the CFO, but it's very,
Yeah.
very, very much a power skill.
Yeah. I remember even, sometimes I'd be working late, and if the CEO was like, how's it going? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm, still getting this done. And if they just said thank you, my thing was also recognition would motivate someone actually appreciating that you're putting in the hours or putting in the work, even if you haven't finished something or got to the end result. I think everyone needs a bit of recognition of the effort they're putting in for things as well. And people forget to do that in organizations.
We do. It's easy just to adopt a what do we pay you for anyway kind of
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, a lot of people do that. A lot of people say, well, they're just doing their job, so they're getting paid. It's a transaction.
Mm,
And again, humans are complicated, so
we
just having
are.
that complexity, that transactional side of things doesn't work. We need more. The emotional side needs to be fulfilled as well.
Yeah, so instead of relegating it to transactional, which typically equals financial remuneration, let's look towards transformational.
Yeah,
because that's the pathway to growing the company. That's the pathway to growing the people and the profits within the company, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what are some ways that you see we can measure? I know you've done a lot of study around peak performance. What are some of the metrics that we should pay attention to when trying to ensure that human beings are at peak performance in a positive work culture?
Yeah, I mean, there's the kind of, it depends again on the type of organization, but
Hmm.
in a obviously in a kind of factory setting, you can tell how many widgets are being produced, those kind of things.
Sure.
But in an organization like in the banking world, I guess you would look at things like engagement survey results, turnover, so things like that that give you clues as to how people are feeling, sick leave statistics, burning out, all those kind of things, how many people, and sometimes people don't report these things, so it's harder to really track it properly. Sometimes people hide these things until it's too
Mm-hmm.
late, essentially. But even physical signs, like if you know your team members, you know when someone's acting off, when someone's not at their peak in terms of how they show up to a meeting, or what their usual energy levels are like, or
Hmm.
what their personality or mood is like on a day-to-day basis. So I think it can be
Hmm.
quite difficult to measure, the hard, how is this impacting our output?
Hmm.
Because you can, and a lot of organizations will push, 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 push. People then burn out, then they get the next lot of people in, but they almost build a model like that. And again, hopefully that is changing for organizations, but some do still operate in that way of, we can treat people however we want because they're a resource, and then we can replace them when they've expired, essentially. So, yeah.
That's interesting, really interesting. So it comes back again to that dialogue, that conversation, knowing people being the ultimate measuring stick that we can use to say, okay, what's working around here, what's not, while availing ourselves of many, many other assessments and tools that are out there. So, what are some of the challenges you're seeing to creating a positive work culture that facilitates and empowers peak performance?
Hmm. It's always that tension between getting the job done, satisfying the clients, getting the money in, and making sure that your people are okay. There's always this kind of fine line to walk between making sure both are considered, and sometimes it goes the other way. If you're too laissez-faire with the getting the results,
Hmm.
your people can maybe be a bit complacent. They might get too comfortable. They might not get the results. They might not be stretched enough. And then it's difficult to get out of that. And if you're pushing too hard the other way, you will get really good people who will go the extra mile. They'll do what they need to do, but then over time they might go, this is too much for me, or I don't enjoy this anymore. And that would be something that then means you have to get new people in. So there's this constant having to recruit people. So the challenge of being able to create this really kind of positive culture is that you've got lots of cooks involved, and lots of stakeholders, and you're being pulled in different directions a lot of the time, and it's not about fixing it, it's about constantly having to assess, where do I need to now focus, what do I need to which direction do I need to move in now, to make sure we're kind of walking that tightrope as effectively as possible.
Yeah, so what are some of those tweaks that will help us walk that tightrope as effectively as
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, no, good question. I think things like, just sometimes, I think the biggest thing would be thinking, even as a leader,
Hmm.
are you pushing back enough, or are you creating enough boundaries, not just for yourself, but for your team members? Because sometimes, the more junior people are, I guess, the less protection they have from these things. But I remember when I first started my banking career, one of the, and I loved the work I did. I loved, the team I was in, everything. But I remember sometimes the deadline for a deal would be driven by when a client was going on their skiing holiday. So everyone would be like killing themselves to finish this deal, work weekends, work late nights to get something done, because someone's going on holiday. And you always want to please the client, but sometimes also, if you want it to be a partnership and not just again, as an organization, to be a commodity, you need to be a little bit more uh, confident about the value you have to offer, where your client won't then go, oh, well, you can't get this done before my skiing holiday, I'll go somewhere else. So there
Yeah.
has to be more of a pushback from leaders as well to
Mm.
set those boundaries, healthy boundaries.
And I take it the client invited none of you to go see them,
No, not
right?
me anyway. I don't think so. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
that was right at the beginning of my career. But you know, it was a good experience though. And I think also sometimes you have to go through these challenging experiences to build resilience and to get tough as well. So I don't and I had more energy when I was younger. I don't
I
like
understand.
regret it. I think it was all really good experience, but
Uh-huh.
I do think lots of people have different pressures for different reasons still, you know, lots of demands coming down. Someone will sit on the email for 2 weeks and then send it to someone else the day before something's due, and then there's pressure put on someone else. So bottlenecks as well, all of those simple things that we can identify, I think, but people need to be confident enough to speak up and say, hey, you know, you got this email 2 weeks ago and you're sending it to me today and it's due tomorrow. I don't have the time to do it now. So it's about everyone taking accountability to make sure they are doing things in a proper manner and proper timing as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like part of the tweak is creating communication that
Yeah.
facilitates a positive work culture. So I want to regard you at least as highly as I do myself, if not more highly, so that I consider, okay, Abigail needs this. I need to go ahead and get this to her as soon as possible, while also taking care of my mind, body, and the business.
Yeah. And I think one, you know, thing that I guess everyone can ask is how does this fit into the bigger picture? Like, how does this fit in? How is what I'm going to do right now impacting where I need to get to in terms of the bigger goals for the organization or my team or my boss?
Hmm.
Because we get a lot of noise as well, don't we, coming in that distracts us.
We do, we do. It's constant interruptions, it seems like. And if you understand the neuroscience behind what happens in your brain when the flow is interrupted, I mean, it takes forever.
Yeah.
11, depending on which study you read, anywhere from 11 to 20 minutes to get back in
Yeah,
that optimal state of flow. So, who wants to do that, right? Well,
exactly.
I really like what you're talking about there in terms of communicating, as well as the boundaries and just understanding here are the boundaries that I'm responsible for, and that has to do with myself and inviting someone to instead of sending it to me the day before, here's the results, the consequences of your action in delaying
Yes.
that email being sent to me. Because sometimes we're just not aware or our emotional intelligence is not high enough to understand that whatever pebble I'm throwing in the lake creates ripples and affects those around me. So I may not know how I'm affecting others. Leadership must call that to our attention and mind those relationships on the team and help the team understand the consequences of their actions or inaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so underrated as well, you know, the ability for a team member to be able to say to their boss, this email came in like it's again down to psychological safety and people feeling comfortable
Mm,
to speak openly without fear of just being kind of black marked, blacklisted in
mm,
some way. So there's definitely more that can be done, but it is all down to communication. It's the simple things we overlook because they're soft skills.
yeah.
And we think this work needs to be done, this is the deadline, and that's it. That it's very black and white. But the essence of getting things done properly is down to communicating well, having effective meetings, or not having meetings at all, having clear instructions. And communication is at I guess, the heart of all of that.
Hmm. Yeah. And if my relationship with my client is so tenuous that his or her skiing holiday is gonna, if not getting information to them before the skiing holiday is gonna torpedo the relationship. We've got some work to do to create a better value understanding in that relationship,
Yeah,
right? And that comes
yeah.
down to communication as well.
Yeah. I think sometimes people don't even challenge it, don't even ask. And that's where I think that the leaders can set more boundaries to
Mm,
push back a little bit more, question things,
mm-hmm,
think about whether something's even relevant for the big picture,
mm-hmm.
rather than just going, we're so busy, we don't even stop to reflect on whether things are
Yeah.
important or not for what we need to achieve, rather
We
than
just,
just stuff.
yeah, we just receive the data rather than filtering it.
Yeah, there's no questioning because people's
Mm,
minds are so busy.
mm-hmm,
Um, there's not enough headspace to go, why are we doing this? Is it important? How does this fit into what else I need to achieve? people just don't have the headspace. We're just running around being busy all the time, which is not the same as productive.
As business, right? Yeah. So there's a hallmark trait of great leaders is to rise above the noise, give consideration strategically
Yeah.
to the way we're rolling it out tactically, and how does this affect our people? How does it affect our relationship? And where can we improve so that we're at peak performance? Yay. Abigail Ireland is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Understandingperformance.com is her website. That URL, you can click on it in the show notes below. Tell us what we're going to find, Abigail, when we go to understandingperformance.com.
Yeah, so I'm constantly updating my website, so you might find it slightly different by the time you look at it. But there's just information in terms of what services I offer, the kind of methodology I use, which is that 3Ps, the psychology, physiology, productivity, or the mind, body, business pieces that in simple language, and just information about things like the talks I do, coaching programs, executive coaching programs, all those kind of things, and workshops, and I do some online courses, so lots of different materials and information that hopefully will be quite useful for you.
Oh, absolutely. So let's get ready to have some more Abigail Ireland, shall we? Go to understandingperformance.com and you'll find all the goodies there. Work Positive Nation always wants to know from my guest, Abigail, so I got to ask you. I want to ask you, right? What's your one thing? So Abigail Ireland, what's one thing you would suggest Work Positive Nation they start doing today to create a positive work culture?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about what everyone can do, it's focus on mindset above all else. And I think, ultimately, again, as human beings, the thing that separates us from everything else, technology, AI, is our minds are there, and they can be shaped and created and evolve. And our mind drives everything else, our behaviors, our actions, our emotions, what we do in a day. So start with the mindset, and don't call it a soft skill, call it the critical skill. It's a thing that's been with us for thousands of years. So focus on tweaking and enhancing the mindset so that everything else, like a domino effect, works better, essentially.
Wonderful. And that's something we all can do, right? Is to work on cultivating that positive mindset and make sure our behaviors follow that. Abigail Ireland, thank you so much for sharing with Work Positive Nation. Understandingperformance.com is her website. Please go there right now and you'll discover some lovely things just like this lovely conversation. Abigail, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
No, it's been fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Joe, for having me today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.